Greetings, everyone. Welcome to our presentation on Lincoln on Leadership, Executive Strategies for Tough Times. Here are your presenters for today. We have David Barrera Jr., myself, Malika Bogan, Candace Kesu, and Alice Rollins. As we go into our summary of the book, we'll be talking about it through 5 points. First, we'll give you some information on Donald T. Phillips, the author, and then the 4 parts of the book: people, character, endeavor, and communication. Donald T. Phillips is a best-selling author of major works of nonfiction. He's well known for his ability to tell stories, and he really brings history alive through his crisp, compelling prose. He has authored a trilogy on American leadership, which includes Lincoln on Leadership, The Founding Fathers on Leadership, and Martin Luther King Jr. on leadership. These books, which have won worldwide acclaim, help pave the way toward the creation of an entire genre of books on historical leadership. Phillips was inspired to write this book because of the few leaders that he actually encountered in life. One of his quotes was, "I am still amazed that of the hundreds of managers and supervisors I've encountered, I can count very few real leaders among them. Many of these men and women are corrupted by power. Most tend to pressure or dictate when simple suggestions or recommendations would suffice. And almost always, there's a lack of understanding of the simple points of human nature." Phillips was concerned that many leadership theories were based in the abstract and wanted to help people become true leaders by giving them tangible exemplars to study. Lincoln on Leadership fills that void by providing concrete illustrations on leadership that are gleaned from Lincoln's presidency. The book acts as a blueprint on the basics of leadership from one of the most beloved presidents in US history. As stated earlier, the book is outlined into 4 key areas of Lincoln's leadership style and philosophy: people, character, endeavor, and communication. At the end of each chapter, Lincoln's principles are shared, which captures the president's most resonate quotes from each chapter and presents them as strategic and fundamental values that all leaders should apply to their leadership styles. And now we'll have Candace. Now we have Alice to talk about the first portion of the book.
Thank you, Malika. Hi, everyone. My name is Alice Rollins. And to introduce the first part of this book, I am going to quote from Abraham Lincoln. "Nearly all men can stand adversity, but if you want to test a man's character, give him power." I specifically chose this quote because I think it's indicative of Lincoln's character, in that although he faced a lot of opposition from individuals who didn't think he was up to par for the task of presidency, he never failed to still treat people with mutual respect and honesty, despite what people said about him, even after he assumed office. Which moves us into the first part of the book, people. Now, as Malika stated earlier, Phillips was interested in teaching fundamental leadership skills from Lincoln's presidency. In this first section, it is broken down into the 3 areas you see before you: get out of the office and circulate among the troops, build strong alliances, and persuade rather than coerce. In the first section of the book, Phillips concentrates on the way in which Lincoln conducted himself during the Civil War, which started at the height of his presidency in 1861 to exemplify the value of human contact as it relates to how true leaders should fashion their own behavior amongst the men and women whom they are working with to follow the goals set before them by that individual. Phillips noted that Abraham Lincoln was the first president to spend the majority of his time outside of the White House rather than in it. In fact, 75% of his time was spent either among his troops, speaking with congressional leaders, or to whomever called upon him. Abraham Lincoln never isolated himself from anyone, regardless of what station they had in life, regardless of where they were in the cabinet, regardless of even what position they held inside of the army. Instead, he preferred to meet with people where they were. He was constantly wandering around, meeting people in their spaces because he felt as if that showed people how much they were appreciated by himself. In 1982, Tom Peters and Robert Waterman, in their book titled In Search of Excellence, coined the term managing by wandering around, or MBWA, which Phillips noted was the cornerstone of Lincoln's philosophy and later became a revolution of modern leadership thinking 100 years later. As Peters and Waterman noted, it is being in touch with your people. It facilitates innovation and makes possible the teaching of values to every member of an organization. What is this except leadership? Abraham Lincoln was the epitome of the value of human contact to people. He understood at the most basic level that it simply demonstrated to people how much they are appreciated by those who are responsible for leading them. In the second section, Build Strong Alliances, Phillips used Lincoln's relationship with his Secretary of State, William H. Seward, Secretary of War, Edward M. Stanton, and General-in-Chief, General Britton McClellan, to highlight the commitment a leader must make in constructing solid alliances despite how one may be treated. And remember, as I said earlier, Lincoln faced a lot of opposition from people who did not believe he was up to par for the executive role of presidency. And oftentimes, a lot of those individuals, like the ones that I just named, were very vocal about the matter. However, that never stopped Lincoln from, again, treating people with dignity and respect or appointing them to key roles within the Army. For example, in the case of Seward, Lincoln's Secretary of State, while he thought Lincoln to be well-intentioned, he also believed him to be unqualified and incompetent, and often tried to usurp his leadership by leading the war effort and even his cabinet. He even went so far as to negotiate secret meetings with the South, but none of that stopped Lincoln from overruling his decisions in a manner that was peaceful but tough and decisive. Even when Seward tried to push the president into a war with England after a British vessel was captured with 2 Confederate commissioners on board, Lincoln held firm and spoke calmly to Seward, saying, "One war at a time." At no time was it ever recorded that Lincoln raised his voice, shouted at Seward, fired him, or scolded him for his actions. Rather, he stood firm as a leader and demonstrated through deliberate actions how to remain tranquil and steadfast in the face of challenges, especially when those challenges were coming from inside his own organization. Phillips noted that as a result of Lincoln's actions, Seward and Lincoln soon became allies, with Lincoln stopping by the secretary's home for long visits, each taking turns to tell each other funny stories, funny anecdotes, and just generally having a really good time with each other and really getting to know each other better. In fact, when matters of foreign affairs would arise, Lincoln would interfere very little, preferring instead to delegating that responsibility and authority to his Secretary of State. In a short period of time, Seward had turned from an attitude of skepticism and mistrust towards Lincoln to one of loyalty and admiration. Now, though this is just one example of Lincoln's leadership style in this particular area, Lincoln gained commitment and respect from people in general because he was willing to take the time from his busy schedule to hear what people had to say. Again, as Phillips stated, contemporary executives should also realize that successful alliances, whether with subordinates or other organizations, put the leader in a position of power and strength. Lastly, in the third section, persuade rather than coerce, Phillips noted that despite how much the press at that time labeled him a dictator, Lincoln was anything but that. Dictatorship, force, coercion were all characteristics of tyrants, despots, and oppressors in Lincoln's view. Lincoln, with the penchant for understanding human nature, gained commitment from individuals through openness, empowerment, and coaching. He was what we would call a transformational leader, which we recently studied, holding deep internal values of moral standards with an exceptional form of influence that moves followers to accomplish more than what is usually expected of them. Lincoln always modeled what he preached and acted more as a fatherly figure when discipline was needed. Again, as Phillips noted, understanding the nuances of various positions and building rapport with a variety of workers allows you to take the most effective path to success without damaging relationships. These are some of my takeaways that I hope that you all will take and kind of resonate with you, hope will resonate with you as you're going through our presentation. I just want to point out a couple of them that really stuck with me. The first being, leaders should always get out of their offices and be more visible among their followers. Human contact shows people they are appreciated. The next one I want to really talk about is leaders should always do their best to model the beliefs they preach to their followers. I think that's very especially important for leaders because I really think it sets the tone from the top down. And that was something that Lincoln did an excellent job at modeling for anyone who came in contact with him. Even when he was a lawyer in Springfield, Illinois, he always remembered those same principles and applied them everywhere he went. These are the Lincoln principles that were shared at the end of each chapter. At the end of each chapter, these were the ones that, again, that most resonated with myself. From the very first one, don't often decline to see people who call on you. For the second one, showing your compassion and caring nature will aid you in forging successful relationships. And in the third one, a good leader avoids issuing orders, preferring to request, imply, or make suggestions. Thank you, everyone. And now I'll return it over to Candace Kesu. Candace?
Thank you, Alice. Hello, I'm Candace Kesu, and I also have a quote from Lincoln. Some single mind must be a master, else there will be no agreement in anything. And I resonate with this as someone has to step up or else nothing will get done. So there, it just takes one single mind or else there won't be an agreement. I had part 2, character, honesty and integrity are the best policies. We've heard that. Never act out of vengeance or spite. Have the courage to handle unjust criticism and be a master of paradox. We all know that Abe got the nickname Honest Abe during the 1830s as a businessman. And then it resurfaced as he was campaigning in 1860. So just as George Washington had the cherry tree, we knew that Abraham Lincoln was the Honest Abe. And he is known for his honesty, integrity, and he was always fair. And in addition to that, he also had a strength in humor. He had the ability to perceive reality and deal with it accordingly. And he was lighthearted in the things that he did. He said, take the lighter side. And also, in addition to the humor, his strength was enhanced, and he knew not generally the best people to carry the movement. he also had to meet with the hard opposition. And that's where he also stood firm. When he was met with adversaries and animosity, he always rose to the top. So with the next slide, I have some of my takeaways. So with the leadership that we're tying it into, leaders who tell their subordinates the truth, even when the news is bad, they gain greater respect and support from people who are less honest. When you want to hear news, you want to hear news straightforward, and you want someone to be honest with you. And also pettiness and spite, vengeance. These are emotions that are beneath the dignity of a leader. A true leader is not going to be petty, spiteful. They're going to rise above that. With that, trust, honesty, and integrity are essential leadership qualities, and they strongly affect the followers. If you need to, if you want to have a good leader, or if you want to be a good leader, your followers need to see you as a person they can trust, so they can take those risks with you, and that you know that you will stand behind them when they take risks. And to overcome adversity, you must have that fortitude and self-confidence. It is how you let criticism affect you, whether you succeed. And that is what Lincoln did well. When he was criticized, he took the high road. He took the, he was self-confident, and he knew that what he was doing was true, because he knew right from wrong. And also, as I said earlier, he would take the lighter side of life, and he would keep that sense of humor. And that's what also kept him going when he was criticized. And considering virtually every organization, followers will respond better and are influenced by a leader that is consistently kind and empathetic. And Lincoln was also kind and empathetic. He cared about his people, and it showed in his leadership. And leaders also need the basic understanding that each person in each situation is handled differently. And that is the mastering of the paradox, where you have to say, not just either or, but and but. You have to take both. So some things are handled uniquely, and some cases they're completely opposite. And Lincoln did a very good job of mastering the paradox. And he had said that it's simply having good common sense. And some of the Lincoln principles that I had connected with, it is your duty to advance the aims of an organization and also help those who serve it. You must set and respond to fundamental goals and values that move your followers. He believed in his followers, and I think that's also why he was a good leader, because people wanted to follow him. And you must be consistently fair and decent in both business and in the personal side of life. And also, when you make it to the top, you should reach down, and bring up the person behind you. Lincoln was very good at bringing up the people. He wanted his followers to be just like him. Then with the vengeance or spite, no purpose is served by punishing merely for punishment's sake, and that people will be more willing to seek an audience when you have a good reputation. And that's one thing that Lincoln also cared about as a leader. He wanted his reputation to precede him. And always keep in mind that once a subordinate is destroyed, he ceases to contribute to the organization. If you beat someone down, they're not going to want to do much more for the organization. And he knew that. So he brought his people up instead of tearing them down. And have malice towards no one, and charity for all. And have the courage to handle unjust criticism. Again, remember that truth is generally the best vindication against slander. And Lincoln had a lot of bad press, and he knew that the truth would come forward. And the probability that you may fall in the struggle, it ought not deter you from the support. He believed in what was just, so he knew when he was just, things would happen the right way. So he did not worry much for what others thought, because he knew the truth, and his support of his cause and his right from wrong would surface. and do the best you know how, the very best you can, and keep doing so until the end. So he always followed through. And he said to the end, once he started something, he gave it his very best all the way to the end. And then make consistency one of the main cogs in the machinery of your organization. He felt that everyone had importance and everyone helped everyone else out, and come to grips with that paradox. Making sure your employees feel, he made sure that his followers felt secure, and in leadership, make sure your employees feel secure, because that will actually promote risk taking. If you're secure, you want to take that risk. If you feel like you're going to be berated, you're not going to want to take the risk. And when you are in deep distress and cannot restrain from expression of it, sit down, write that letter, and you can vent. He said, and Lincoln even wrote this. He said, but don't send it. And that's also true with sending an email. Vent, 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 but no, don't hit send. And now we will have David take over.
Thank you, Candice. Greetings, everyone. My name is David Barrera Jr., and I am happy to present this information to you all. One of my favorite Lincoln quotes actually came from the book, and that is, "I now wish to make the personal acknowledgement that you were right and I was wrong." So this quote by Lincoln was taken from a letter that he wrote to Ulysses S. Grant after the latter captured Vicksburg. And he wrote this after he had questioned Grant's strategies and now wanted to praise him for his efforts. So as current and future leaders, we can all learn something from this. There will be times when we are right, and there will be times when we are wrong. And it is important to not only understand yourself when you are wrong, but also to communicate that message to your team. Having an effective line of communication can go a long way. So the section of Lincoln on Leadership I will be presenting on is part 3, the endeavor. This section will entail the following. So exercise a strong hand, be decisive, lead by being led, set goals and be results oriented, keep searching until you find your Grant, Ulysses S. Grant that is, and encourage innovation. So in these sections, these are some of the key takeaways that I had, as well as a bit of information as to why I found some of them interesting. So the Civil War was something no other president had been forced to deal with. Everything Lincoln did during this time, every decision he made was done without being able to consult someone who had previously experienced this. So think about that for a second. We have people in our field, we have colleagues that we can fight in, people that we can reach out to, maybe some mentors that we can ask, hey, what did you do in this situation? Or, hey, I'm experiencing this or that. And they can provide you with some advice because there's a pretty good chance that they've been in that situation before, or they have enough experience to where they can probably give you some tips as to how to proceed in that, certain scenario. Lincoln didn't have any of this. And I also relate this to the pandemic and what we've been doing for the last over a year now. When the pandemic first started, nobody ever thought, that we would be in a predominantly online environment. And there are still a lot of institutions, mine for an example, that are still doing this. We telecommute most of the time. So again, this is important to note because there were plenty of great examples of his leadership that were illustrated in the book, which I will be going over. So confusion, desperation, and urgency all combined to give Lincoln the perfect opportunity to act. Now, what does this mean? Essentially, all the factors assisted Lincoln in his decision-making process, as there was really not much time to act, and he had to take swift and decisive actions in his position of leadership. Again, shifting back to the pandemic and how when it first happened, we had to find a way to be able to provide the same services to students, albeit in a different format. So Lincoln set a precedent of directing the expenditure of money without the official approval of Congress. So this is another example of taking swift and decisive actions. To give you some perspective, when I make similar decisions in my role, I usually like to say, just do it and I'll take the heat later. So Lincoln could also be decisive and tough with his subordinates when he was forced to do so. Lincoln specified the former Secretary of the Treasury's inflexibility. He ended up letting the Secretary of the Treasury go and stated how he did not have another choice. Inflexibility, as you all know, is oftentimes detrimental to progress made within your own institutions. We all know that one person who is the least flexible and can hinder progress. Competent executive decision-making is crucial in any organization. This is extremely relatable because you always want competent people leading your team and also to relay that message as they pertain to the decision-making processes in your institution. So he alone bore the responsibility and would answer to the American people for his actions. Lincoln, in true leadership fashion, took the fall for mistakes made by his team and put none of the blame on them. Lincoln brought individuals together to work out their differences. He wanted individuals to communicate effectively to resolve their issues. We can see the importance of how effective communication can enhance the atmosphere at work and lead to more positive outcomes by a team. So Lincoln was also flexible and open-minded. His flexibility and being open to the interpretations of others are undoubtedly crucial in any institution or organization, especially with the complexity of higher education. Think about how critical that is. When possessing the ability to be flexible and open-minded, it's not easy to sit there and have to listen to the perspective of others when you thought yours was so great. But that's the beauty of teamwork. Everybody coming together because essentially we all have the same end goal. So achieving results rather than only carrying out activities. Why work for something and then have no end results? As leaders, we want to ensure that our objectives are being met, and if they aren't, it is time to pivot and go back to the drawing board. Lincoln united his followers with the corporate mission. Our institutions and organizations, for example, all have mission statements, and it's important to remember this as we continue working towards the success of our students or the success of whatever it is that your organization is striving for. Never lose sight of that end goal. So be a catalyst for change. This statement has been said several times and has taken many different forms throughout this course, as you all are well aware of. It is important to understand that we cannot remain stagnant as the world around us continues to evolve. So be that catalyst for change. Be decisive and create an atmosphere of entrepreneurship that fosters innovative techniques. Make decisions, yes, but also allow for input from your team. Effective leaders ensure every member on their team has a voice, and more importantly, that voice is heard. Ask for help during the implementation process. Don't do this alone. Teams exist for a reason, and it's important to delegate when necessary so that tasks and responsibilities flow effectively. You don't want to overwhelm yourself with a whole bunch of work. I know especially with committee work, everybody wants to be on committees and do this and that, but if you begin overwhelming yourself with too much responsibility, it can really take a toll on you. Just make sure that those tasks do get delegated accordingly. All right, so these were some of the Lincoln principles that were listed at the end of each chapter that resonated with me the most. Seize the initiative and never relinquish it. Remember that compromise does not mean cowardice. So this is crucial, again, when working with the team. It's okay to abandon your idea if someone else came up with a more effective way of implementation. I know if somebody came up to me and said, hey, you're doing a really great job with this, but if we do XYZ instead of ABC, we can cut the time to put that information out by half, or, there's always more effective ways to do things. So try not to feel insecure or threatened by your followers. I would go a step further and say to serve as a mentor when appropriate. As effective leaders, we want to empower our followers. So let disputing parties work out their differences by bringing them together and guiding their dialogue. Help them to help the team and its mission, essentially. So setting specific short-term goals that can be focused on with intent and immediacy by subordinates. So sub-goals are a great way to reach your ultimate goal. We all know what the end goal is, but how are we going to get there? And essentially that is what the purpose of a sub goal is. You know, I liken this, I've told students several times, it's okay if you want to go to law school, there's nothing wrong with that, but you can't expect to be a lawyer by Friday, right? You have to do this, you have to do that. There's a lot of different steps that you have to take that are going to ultimately meet your sub goal and or ultimately lead you to getting your ultimate goal. So having those steps laid out, for example, is a good way to see that. And you can also monitor your progress in that way. So your task will neither be done nor attempted unless you watch it every day and hour and force it. So this doesn't mean to hover over your task and focus all of your intention on it. But what it does mean is to not let it fall off your radar and continue to check for that progress. All right, you know, we want to make sure that whatever is getting done is being accomplished in whatever timeline you have set out. So remember that half-finished work generally proves to be labor lost. So putting in half the effort to ultimately accomplish nothing is time and resources lost. If they don't perform adequately, ease them out of power gradually, always giving them ample time to turn it around. And this one goes well with the next principle, which is don't lose confidence in your people when they fail. Most of us want the best for ourselves, but remember that space and grace is important. We all have strengths and weaknesses, and identifying these in your team members is crucial to the overall success of the group. And remember that the best leaders never stop learning. You should always take the time to learn whenever you can. You know, it's always important, especially as population evolves and higher education continues to evolve. You know, we want to make sure that we're keeping up with things. In his endeavor, Lincoln changed attitudes, behaviors, and the way people live their lives. He set goals, preached his vision, and accomplished his mission. So now I will pass the mic over to my colleague, Malika, who will continue our presentation.
So the quote that I chose was also from the book, and I feel that it really captures the spirit of how Lincoln handled his followers, his commanders, and in fact, his entire command. And it states, I must tell you, I have some painful intimations that some of your corps and division commanders are not giving you their entire confidence. This would be ruinous if true, and you should therefore, first of all, ascertain the real facts beyond all possibility of doubt. This speaks to Lincoln's commitment to making sure that trust was engendered among leaders and followers, so that those under him and those working with him could deal with it and bring it out into the open so that if needed, some healing could happen and people could regain their trust in one another. So I'm going to go into part 4, communication. Many of my colleagues have spoken quite a bit about Lincoln's style of communication. His was unlike any other president. In the 80s, President Reagan was considered the great communicator. However, he is dwarfed, as said in the book, by Lincoln. The sections that I will cover are master the art of public speaking, influence people through conversations and storytelling, and preach a vision and continually reaffirm it. President Abraham Lincoln was indeed a master of the art of public speaking. He could bring about facts, dates, witticisms, and stories that were apropos for any situation. His contenders were often worried and scared to get into a debate with President Lincoln. And even before he assumed the presidency, he had a very robust reputation of being able to trounce his opponents verbally. influence people through conversations and storytelling, really gives us information about how Lincoln dealt with those who came to him, whether they came in a manner of goodwill or ill will. Often, people were coming to complain or provide insults for President Lincoln. However, many found that after speaking with him at length, they were unable to voice their displeasure and found themselves actually liking the man that they were convinced that they disliked at first. His stories were very humorous, they were captivating, and they kept people wanting to hear more from President Lincoln. He made sure to converse with all types of people and encouraged some of the people who worked with him to use common language so that everyone could understand what they were talking about rather than using conflated language that would go above people's heads. Lincoln really was committed to his vision, and he made sure that he reaffirmed it at every available opportunity. He walked his talk and was a man of true leadership character throughout. Some of the takeaways that I had from this portion of the book, I will highlight. Before, during, and after he became president, Abraham Lincoln really knew the power of words and the possibilities of just the right turn of phrase at the optimal point. He knew that he needed to make connections with all types of people to be effective in leadership. So he was active in reaching out not only to those who were well to do or who held power similar to his own, but he also made sure that he reached out to soldiers and the common man as he went through his presidency. Lincoln faced many challenges and losses in his political career, but he used humor in order to uplift his mood and keep him going. He realized that this didn't negate those losses. It didn't make them go away, but it served to uplift his spirit and the spirits of those around him. He encouraged others to be forthright in their communication. He discouraged the use of bluster and loquacity and just wanted people to get to the truth. So here are some of the principles that were summarized at the end of this chapter. Of course, Lincoln was very eloquent and he was a dynamic speaker. He was funny and he could pull facts that captivated everyone who listened. He was from humble beginnings, but he made sure that he educated himself on a wide variety of topics. And he could deliver speeches off the top of his head that really outshined his opponent's well-prepared ones. Even though he was known for being very eloquent, he made sure that when communicating, he was clear and consistent. So there was no misunderstanding in what he was trying to get across. He could pull out a story that helped any conversation with any audience, and he was able to disarm people and confuse their initial intentions. He relayed the vision of equality for men And he demonstrated that he really meant it, not only in his words, but also in his deeds. Through his speeches, he reminded his followers of the shared vision for the United States. And this made them more committed to act in furtherance of that vision. Lincoln realized, and this is a quote from the book, that the process of renewal releases the critical human talent and energy that is necessary to ensure success. Meaning that reaffirming his vision, allowing people to have peace, gave them the strength and fortitude that they needed to press on to a shared vision.
All right, so in this section, we are going to give a brief book review on what our thoughts were while reading this book. So I gave this book a 4.5-star rating because I believe its applicability to institutions of higher education and beyond is vital. Even though the book was based on Lincoln and his leadership style from the mid-19th century, the author does a great job of conveying the message to the reader in a way that is understandable and relatable.
I gave the book 5 out of 5 stars. I felt that the 15 points that the author, Phillips, pulled out were poignant, they were timely, and that they were strategies and virtues that any leader could employ in their leadership. Also, they were values that we don't often see in today's leaders. And hopefully, the leaders of the future will be able to read and espouse these values and strategies.
I gave the book 4.5 out of 5. It was written very well, and I could say a lot of things that David and Malika have said, because it did help tie in the leadership. It helped me learn more about leadership and tie it to what we were learning in the course, as well as I've learned a lot more about Lincoln than I ever thought I would. I knew the surface of Lincoln, but I really knew who he was as a leader, how he felt about his followers. So the book was engaging enough that I really took a lot away with it. Took away a lot with it. Anyway, 4.5.
I gave the book a 5 out of 5. I wasn't quite sure what to expect when I saw the book on Lincoln on leadership, because I thought, oh no, not another biography. But this book was absolutely a fantastic read. I mean, once you get started, the pages just continually to flow and flow and flow. Phillips did a really great job of really honing in on specific concrete examples of Lincoln's leadership style that can be applied, as my colleagues have already said, in the 21st century. And that's what I appreciate the most. Again, that it wasn't just a biography. In fact, it wasn't a biography at all on Lincoln, but really showcasing his leadership style, how he interacted in all of those 4 key areas of leadership and philosophy that he espoused. And so for that, I gave it a 5.5, or 5 out of 5.
All right, so really quick, we are going to just throw in some fun facts about Abraham Lincoln that we kind of stumbled upon when we were doing our research for this book. So a lot of these here, I'm going to be really honest with everybody listening. I had absolutely no idea that he did. You know, I could have lived my whole life and just never known this much about Abe Lincoln. He loved animals a lot, apparently. You know, I love animals too, but I'm also allergic to dogs and cats, so I can't love them too much. And that one right there is probably the most interesting one that I thought. I had no idea that he was enshrined in the Wrestling Hall of Fame. I think that's actually pretty cool. And I'm somewhat jealous. I used to be a big wrestling fan when I was younger. His favorite food was fruits. Awesome. Okay, and this is our reference page, of course, the references that we had for this book. And that concludes our presentation. Thank you all for listening, and we hope you enjoyed the presentation.